All right, we are back for the final rewatch episode. This is my rewatch video for episode 8, the final episode of the Wheel of Time TV show. Like I did for episode 5, I thought I'd do a spoiler-free review of this one because this was my lowest rated episode first time around. And I wanted to know if, with some distance from the show, if it improved. And it did, actually. I have to say, it isn't as bad as I remember. It's still my least favorite, I have to say. It's still the bottom of my list. But I think thinking about it in the full context of both this show, like this season, and the complete story from the books that I know that they're telling, I can see a reason for a lot of things. I can see foreshadowing, and I can see planning, and I appreciate that. Also, just because, when you're this much of a nerd, like, I know a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. I feel like this episode in particular was probably affected more by COVID than the others. I know, for example, that they lost a couple of locations for shooting because of travel restrictions, which meant that they had to build sets or use green screen. I know that because of safety restrictions, they were not allowed to have actors and stunt performers to be the Trollocs and use practical effects, so they had to use a lot of digital effects. I would even attribute the loss of Matt, like the loss of Barney Harris, a bit to COVID. Barney Harris might still have left at the end of this season, but the reason he left in the middle of the season instead of the end was likely because there was like a 6 or 9 month shutdown for COVID while they were just waiting to be able to shoot again. It also could possibly contribute to the fact that there was an actor in this episode who was supposed to be a major character in season 2. He might have gotten another job during that shutdown, so that had to change as well. And those are just the things that we know about, right? Like, I'm sure that there were tons of other things, tons of other hurdles that COVID threw in the way of this episode. So I know part of what they were up against, so I forgive some of this episode. But the best way I can think of to describe it is like, if someone cooks a meal and then as I'm eating it, they tell me, oh, by the way, I was missing several key ingredients while making this. And then when I eat it, it tastes, not great. I'm not going to judge their cooking by that one meal because I know that they were missing several key ingredients, probably had to improvise and experiment. So this is not representative of what they can do. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to enjoy the meal as much as I would have if it had the right ingredients, I'm not going to say, oh, I love that. Like, can you make it exactly like that again? I'm going to hope that the next time they make it, that they have what they need. What I'm saying is, I forgive a lot of the things in this episode that bother me because I think it really did bear the brunt of the effects of COVID. And I don't judge the show for it. I don't think it's representative, but I still, even knowing all that they were up against, I can't say that I love it. It's fine. Okay, so let's get into the rewatch proper. But before we do, spoiler warning, obviously spoilers for the entire first season of The Wheel of Time. This is the final episode that I'm going to be talking about here. And as far as book spoilers, I'm going to be mentioning things all the way from New Spring, which is the prequel, to Towers of Midnight, which is book 13, the second to last book in The Wheel of Time. So if you haven't finished up until book 13, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. But the rest of you, let's get into it.
Let's be nerdy, babe. Let's be nerdy, let's be nerdy. Let's be nerdy, babe. Let's be nerdy, babe. Let's be nerdy, let's be nerdy, babe.
So, of all the episodes, this is probably the one I rewatched the least. It's kind of suffering the same thing that the last books in the series do, which is that I've reread those the least because they are the last ones to come out. This episode was the last episode to come out, so I've rewatched it the least. Also, it was my least favorite, so it's, there's certain episodes I've watched many times because I loved them. But this one, I've rewatched the least. The reason I'm mentioning that is the cold open caught me off guard. I'd forgotten about it. And so it was really, really fun to watch it again. The actors here, they do such an amazing job of making this sound like a real language. I heard that what they did is they acted it all out in English and practiced it that way and then went back and did it all in the old tongue. And I don't know. Whatever they did, it worked. This is amazing. They do such a good job with this. Also going to call out the costume design. I don't know about costumes. I just know that often when people try to do futuristic costumes, they don't look comfortable to me, which is the opposite of what I would think futuristic clothing should be. And this looks comfortable, it looks practical, and yet somehow futuristic, and I don't know, it's good. I like the costumes. Still, though, don't like that she calls him the Dragon Reborn. I wish she just called him the Dragon. I think I know why they did this, though, because it sort of reinforces the cycle for people reading the book, or not, who haven't read the books and they're just watching this. So like, oh yeah, the Dragon Reborn just keeps coming back. But I know that the canon of the books is that they're not supposed to know that there was a dragon prior to this. Like, it is supposed to have forgotten all of that, but it's a little thing. It probably won't have ripple effects out into the show, so it's just like a tiny little irritation there. But okay, speaking of that, though, I posited in a previous video that the reason for Lews Theron's demotion from Tamerlane was because they needed a natural way for the dialogue to reveal that he was the Dragon Reborn. So, he uses her title. He needs a title to call her, so Tamerlane, fine, and then she will use his title in response. I still think that I'm right about that, but things can serve multiple purposes, and actually in good writing, often they do. And my friend Bree has an excellent theory about this that I think it makes so much sense. Her theory is that it's foreshadowing. It's foreshadowing the confrontation between Egwene and Rand. It's foreshadowing a confrontation between the Dragon Reborn and the Amyrlin seat. And I think that, narratively speaking, that really, really works. It feels like more of a closed loop in the story than having LTT be both the dragon and the Tamerlane. And speaking of closed loops, Bree actually brought something else to my attention that I may have mentioned it before. I don't know, because I know I noticed it, but my problem is whenever I try to talk about or look at the cold open from, like the very first cold open from episode 1, I get so distracted by the suspenders that I can't really pay attention to anything else. But, okay, the wording Latra uses here has got to be a deliberate mirror of the wording from that initial cold open of women picking up the pieces. Or, okay, actually, I would say it's the wording in that cold open that's a mirror of this, because I'm fairly certain that first cold open from episode 1 was one of the last things filmed in the show, because I either read or heard or saw too many too many interviews I've read and stuff. I don't know where, but I'm sure I heard Rosamund Pike talk about filming a new opening scene for the show fairly late in the process of filming. So I think this final episode cold open was filmed, and then they likely thought of a way to close the loop by adding a cold open to episode 1. Moving on, this has been talked about a lot elsewhere, but in case for some reason, if anybody here watching this video is unaware, this set, the Blight, they had to build it because at the last minute they lost a location. They weren't allowed to travel because there were travel restrictions, and so they built that. They built this. And knowing that, it is impressive, but I have to say, I can't help it. I notice it. There are shots where things seem real to me, and then something will happen, like the camera will change or something, and my brain just yells, "It's a set!" in my ears. And I wish I could shut that part of my brain off, but I can't. I also think that weird tell, like Maureen has a tell thing, was added to cover for Matt's absence. And again, if you haven't heard my theory, I'll just go over it quickly. I'm pretty sure that Perrin was supposed to be the one to go to the Blight with Lan and, use his super wolfy senses to help track Moraine and Rand. But with Matt gone, somebody had to stay in the fortress so that somebody could be there to interact with Fane. So Perrin stayed behind, so they needed a way for Lan to follow Moraine, so they came up with this weird tell idea. I honestly think that they probably should have just left it alone. I don't think people would have questioned how Lan was able to follow her, or even just know where the Eye of the World is, because in this turning, the Eye seems to be in a fixed location. But okay, all of that having been said, this dialogue about the tell had to have been added, and I wonder if it replaced some of the context for the iconic poetry, like my favorite landlines, "I will hate the man you choose." Like, I wonder if this Moraine has a tell was used and they had to take out some other dialogue. Because as much as I loved hearing that iconic poetry, like it gives me goosebumps. It does feel like Lan says it completely out of context. He needs to give her some reason that they can't be together before saying these lines. Like, in the books, he's like, "No, I have to go to the," like, she doesn't know any of this, at least not that we know. And if that's all happened off screen, that's not okay. Like, there's sometimes you can have stuff be off screen, but if it's context for something that's about to happen, we do need to know about it. Also, okay, he says, "You would let me go without you?" Like, as if that's an incredibly noble thing to do, which, weird. I, I don't know where that's coming from. Like, we have not seen enough of their relationship, quote unquote, for this to be a thing. He has never said, like, "I'll never leave your side." Like, there's no reason for that to be a thing that he says to her. I love the part where they get into the poetry, but all the stuff leading up to it, it's just, I need more context. And if, like I said, I'm worried now that they replaced the context with Maureen has a tell. Okay, so Nynaeve has a block now. Okay, just hear me out. This is how I'm trying to figure this out. In the show, we learn in episode 1 that she knows that listening to the wind is channeling, or it's the ability to channel, or it's channeling adjacent. I don't know. And she used to be able to do that. So she knew that she at least had the ability to channel, and now she can't do it. So is the show canon that she wasn't blocked before and was able to consciously channel, or at least consciously do something power adjacent, but now since she exploded, now she's blocked? I'm not mad at that. Like, for me, that actually works with the show canon, although it still leaves me really, really confused as to how women can sense other women's ability to channel. Okay, so this story that Moraine tells about being beaten by an Aes Sedai until she grabbed the source without thinking, this is from the books, but it's not Moraine that this happens to. It's, I can't remember. It's a red sister talking about Galena. Galena beat a red sister until she was able to channel. Elaida did beat Moraine in New Spring, but it was not like this. I think it was while she was studying for the Amberlin test, like when she had to go do the Amberlin test. But I still actually think that this story that Moraine is telling, if they ever reveal who it is, it will be Elaida and not Galena. I think they just have changed the details a bit. They've taken the details from the Galena story and made that story about Elaida and Moraine instead. I will say for the record that I do not think, and I sincerely hope I'm right about this, that they will merge those two characters. I don't want them to merge Galena and Elaida, because in my mind they serve very, very different functions in the story. So in episode 6, I said that so far, Moraine is the only person to use an in-world curse or an in-world swear word and have it sound natural. The reason why I qualified that and said so far is because Uno. It sounds right coming out of his mouth. And maybe I'm wrong about this, but I mentally attribute this to the fact that the actor who is playing Uno is a Wheel of Time fan, like a long-time Wheel of Time fan. And maybe it's just me, but I know that I have on multiple occasions when I'm like deep in a reread, I have accidentally used Wheel of Time swear words in real life. And so this could just be me projecting, but I heard him say like, "Oh, goat kiss and hide." And I went, "Oh yeah, I bet he's done that too. I bet he's done the same thing as me, and that's why it sounds natural coming out of his mouth." There are times when I'm watching this show that I wish I could remove the book reader part of my brain, because even like the first time around when I was watching this episode, I was annoyed, really annoyed at all the time that was spent with Agomar and Amelisa, because like, and it's just me, obviously this is my video, so obviously it's just me, but in my head I was going, who the hell cares about these two? They are not important characters. And I still feel that, like even more so now, given how I know this episode played out. This time though, when I was watching this, I found myself wondering if it's possible that any of this was added to make up for, again, the loss of Matt, the loss of a few different locations of shooting, the loss of the actor playing Ingtar. That one doesn't get talked about as much, but yeah, this guy, who I'm going to put up here, he was supposed to be Ingtar. Like, his casting was announced. We saw it. But then he got another job. So he's still in this episode, but I'm going to guess that they had dialogue that was supposed to be setting him up for who he's supposed to be next season, that would have, established him as a significant person. I don't know if they would have filmed it and then had to cut it afterwards, or, and then film other stuff to replace it, or if they were able to cut the scenes prior to filming, but then of course had to write something to fill the space that establishing his character would have left. The second option, of course, like being able to fill it prior to filming, is a better option. But thinking about it, that's two holes in the story that they're having to fill with something. That's Ingtar and Matt. And of course, Matt is a massive hole, is a bigger hole that in this episode that has to be filled. So I'm wondering if all of this Agomora and Amelisa stuff is to cover for the loss. Look at these blades that Moraine channels at Ishii, and think back to the blades that Logain made to shoot the Aes Sedai in episode 4. I think they're the same thing. And then, of course, the shield that he puts on Moraine is the same thing as the shield that they put on Logain. Again, just reasserting my very, very strong belief that Moraine isn't stilled, she's shielded, and then the shield is tied off. In fact, actually, if you listen to the audio description, it says that Ishii here ties a knot of light between his fingers. I think it's pretty clear. And just because I got it, it's amazing. Just have to call out Rosamund Pike's acting again. Like, damn. Okay. Whew. Trollocs and Fades. They do not look great, which is so frustrating given how amazing they looked in episode 1. And of course, like, if you're way deep in the weeds like I am, you know why, right? It's COVID. They weren't able to have the actors in to do this with practical effects like in episode 1. So this is all digital. And I understand the why of it. I know how good this could have been, and so it's frustrating. And I kind of wish that they had just not. No, okay. Here's the thing, because I think it might have been better to not show it, like if they had just not shown any of the Trollocs or any of the battle and had it completely off screen. But I think if that had happened, that would have been seen as a cop out, right? Like if that had been the version that we'd seen, I think that would be the complaint about, oh, come on, how cheap and cheesy it is to say, oh yeah, there was a big, amazing, epic, awesome battle that happened over there, just off camera. Like, I think people would be complaining about that. So I think we're in a situation that's like, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I don't know what's better. Now, I initially had some issues with this battle plan because the women were able to take out the entire army, so it felt like a waste to have them here. Like, the men on the front died for nothing, really. They could have just let the Trollocs in, like just open the door, let them run through, and the women could take care of them. But, as has been pointed out, Amelisa had no idea that she was inviting a nuke, 2 nukes really, into her circle. And there was a thread on Twitter a while back from a military expert that I can remember none of, because I don't understand military strategy, but it explained this battle plan in a way that made sense and, like, explained the logic behind it, so I'm gonna let the battle plan go. I'm a little less frustrated with it now. Except for one thing. Okay, Amelisa should have brought them into the circle earlier, just to test it out. And if she had done that, she might have known that she had a nuke or a couple of nukes and could have done more than she did, saved some of those men on the front lines. To wait until the last minute to do it is so risky. What if it didn't work? What if none of the women could form a circle and then you're just standing there being trampled by Trollocs as they run into Faldara? Rand, Yesha Stradowski is a really good crier. He's really good at that, like, single tear thing. I still can't believe that they just put the Horn of Valir down? Like, what? You just dug it up from its safe space. You hear a noise and you're like, it'll be fine right here in the open. I think that this change to the channeling rules about how, in the books you can't be burnt out during linking, but in the show you can. I think it's probably a good change for the show, especially given that they're introducing linking this soon. But even if they did, like, whenever you introduce the concept of linking, then it's going to be every single time in the show when women are in trouble, they're going to be like, well, why don't they just link? In the books, you can have details explaining things, going into people's minds to understand why they are or aren't linking. But here, this just gets it out of the way. It's a good way to explain why in the future they aren't just always linking whenever something bad happens. I know some people didn't like this editing, the flashing between the Eye of the World and the fantasy that was happening in Rand's head, but I actually really, really like it. Entirely because of the contrast in Ishii's behavior in both. It's fast and it's not easy to spot, but, like, Ishii in the Rand fantasy world he's doing the most. Like, he is acting like he's full. It's a performance for Rand's benefit. Like, no, don't. Ishii in the Eye, he's just all like, whatever happens here, I'm cool. I win. He's whatever Rand does, he knows he's got this. Okay, this is not something I noticed, but I can't remember where I heard it to give it credit. It was likely the Dusty Wheel, another YouTube channel you should check out, but I'm not sure. But anyway, okay. When Rand explodes Itchy, if you look at the seal, there's cracks on it, and count them. There's 8. There's 8 cracks. And then if you remember back to episode 5, when Stepan had his Forsaken statues, there were 8 statues there. I don't think that's a coincidence. There's very little in the show that I actively dislike. Like, there's a lot that I really, really love. There's a decent amount that I really, really like. There's a fair amount that I'm like, that's fine. But this not death scene of Egwene or Nynaeve's here, I actively dislike it. Like, I really, really don't like it. I don't like, first of all, that she gives a big speech before it, because that does not feel like Nynaeve to me. Now, of course, I suppose Nynaeve in the show can be different from Nynaeve in the books, but for me, this is jarring, because up until, like, this second, the way Nynaeve is in the show feels exactly like the Nynaeve from the books to me. Like, it's my headcanon of who she is, up on screen, acting in front of me, and then suddenly she does this, and I go, what are you doing? Because Nynaeve in the books, she's always at the drop of a hat ready to sacrifice herself for her friends or her people, but she never makes a big deal of it. She's not going to make a scene. She's just going to do it. So this speech, and yes, I know it's a retread of a speech from the Women's Circle meeting and whatever, it's still making a big speech. It's making this moment a significant moment. And in Nynaeve's head, that wouldn't be. It's just the thing she does. It's the right thing to do. She would just do it. And so it feels wrong to me. Okay, the other thing about this that I really don't like, if you watch the behind the scenes for this, they talked about the way they did the burn effects on the women, and they made a number scale of burns that, showed like this type of burn is completely burnt to death, and this type of burn, like number 4 or whatever, is just kind of semi-charred but still alive, and Nynaeve is supposed to come across as charred but hanging on to life. They did not mean for her to look dead, but I don't think that they were successful. Like, I saw a lot of reaction videos that thought that she died, and the only thing that kept me personally from thinking that she was dead and being brought back to life by Egwene was my book knowledge, right? Because she looks dead. Most of the reaction videos I saw thought that she died. The people I know who watched the show who hadn't read the books thought that she died, and they all thought that Egwene brought her back to life. It's like, okay, I'm a teacher, right? So if I teach a class and I have a test and 1 or 2 of my students don't do well on the test, I would think, okay, those particular students are struggling with this topic. If I give a test and a significant portion, like half of the kids in my class, don't do well on the test, I have to think, oh, okay, maybe I didn't teach that right. And if I give a test and most of my class fails the test, that's 100% a me problem. That's not a them problem. I didn't do a good job in conveying the information. That's how that works. That's what I'm saying here. I don't know if I feel confident enough to say most people misinterpreted the message that they were trying to get across, because obviously I don't know most of the people who watch the show, but I do know, just based on the representative sample that I have seen, that there's probably a significant portion of people that misinterpreted the message they were trying to convey, and so that's a sign that something was amiss. Something went wrong here. Fane. Fane is so good. This is a monologue. It's a monologue, but he makes it gripping, and I want more Fane. I don't know, maybe he's so good because we're just getting drips of him, but he's really, really good. And speaking of good, God, Moraine breaking down here, it's heartbreaking. Rosamund Pike. Said it before. I mean, how did we get Rosamund Pike in this show? Like, she's so good. She's so good. She's so good. And, okay, check this out. The cat on the front of the Shanshan ship here has 3 eyes, like the Grom in the books. Like, I don't remember. Do the Lopar in the books have 3 eyes? I don't know. But I love that. That's a detail that I missed completely and just caught this time for the first time. And it's really, really cool. It's like I don't know if they're going to show us Lopar or whatever, but Shanshan have monsters and their monsters have 3 eyes. Yes. Okay, that's it. That is the end of my rewatch of this season. Actually, I was going to say this episode. No, but that's the entire season. did you pick up on anything new in this episode? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to support me, like my channel, please consider checking out my Patreon. I will link it in the description below. And as always, I am ever grateful to my patrons. Thank you so much for your support. It really does mean a lot to me. And with that, I am going to end this here. So please like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye!